My wife quit her job and didn't tell me. Found out 3 weeks later when her old coworker asked how retirement was treating her. Her reasoning? You earn enough for both of us. So the next week, I quit mine too. Didn't tell her either. Let her find out the way I did. Before we get into it, if you're into stories about marriages that run on secrets and receipts, hit subscribe, because this one gets messy fast. I'm 34, male, married 4 years, together 6. My wife, 32, worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown. Decent job, decent pay, nothing glamorous, but stable. I work in commercial real estate, and yeah, I make good money. Not buy a yacht money, but comfortable. 6 figures, steady bonuses, the kind of income that lets you breathe. We'd never had the conversation about one of us staying home. Never talked about her quitting, scaling back, any of it. We didn't have kids yet. We weren't planning to anytime soon, so there wasn't even a logical reason for her to stop working. She just liked her freedom, her own money, her own identity outside the house. At least that's what she always said. So imagine my confusion 3 weeks ago when I'm at a work happy hour and I run into Denise, my wife's old coworker, who I'd met maybe twice at office parties. Denise smiles at me and goes, "So how's the newly retired life treating your wife? Must be nice." I laughed it off, said something like, "Oh, she's just taking a little time," because I genuinely thought Denise had bad information. Wife hadn't said a word about quitting. She still got up every morning, made coffee, said off to work like clockwork, came home around 6 like clockwork. Nothing had changed on the surface. I asked Denise when this supposedly happened. She said, "Like 3 weeks ago?" She gave 2 weeks' notice, cleaned out her desk. Everyone assumed you guys were doing fine, so she didn't need it anymore. Denise looked a little uncomfortable once she realized I had no idea what she was talking about. She backpedaled, said maybe she had it wrong, maybe it was a different department. But I know Denise. Denise doesn't get things wrong. Denise is the Office Information Network. I drove home that night replaying the last 3 weeks in my head. The same routine. The same long day at work comments. The same complaints about her manager, which, if she wasn't working there anymore, would have to be either lies or reruns. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted proof first, because I've read enough of these stories online to know that confronting someone with secondhand gossip gets you nowhere. So I did something petty and effective. I called her old office directly, pretending to be a courier company confirming a delivery address for her. The receptionist, bless her, confirmed without hesitation that she doesn't work here anymore. She left about 3 weeks ago. Case closed. That night at dinner, I set my fork down and asked her straight out, "How was work today?" She said, "Fine, same old, same old. Karen's still a nightmare." I nodded slowly. Interesting, since Karen doesn't have anyone to be a nightmare to. You don't work there anymore. Her face did this thing where all the color just drained out at once. She tried to recover, laughed a little, said, "What are you talking about?" "Denise. Happy hour. She asked how retirement's treating you." Silence. She put her fork down too. "Okay, fine," she said. "I quit. About 3 weeks ago?" "And you weren't going to tell me?" She shrugged. Actually shrugged, like I'd asked her about a haircut. "I didn't think it was a big deal. You earn enough for both of us. I figured I'd tell you eventually, once I had a plan for what's next." I sat there for a second, just absorbing that sentence. You earn enough for both of us. Like my income was a shared bank account she could dip into without a conversation. Like my paycheck existed to absorb whatever decisions she made without me. Not the money part that bothered me most, honestly. It was the "I didn't think it was a big deal" part. She'd been lying to my face every single day for 3 weeks. Fake work stories. Fake complaints about a boss she no longer had. Getting dressed like she had somewhere to be. All of it theater. And I was the only one in the audience who didn't know it was a show. "So what have you been doing all day?" I asked. "Stuff," she said. "Running errands, going to the gym, meeting friends for lunch. I needed a break. That job was draining me." "And you couldn't have told me that? We could have talked about it. Maybe you take a month off. We plan it out, budget for it, whatever. Instead, you just decided unilaterally and lied about it for 3 weeks. She got defensive fast. Why does it matter how I got here as long as we're fine financially? You're acting like I did something criminal. I just wanted some peace before the interrogation started, which, by the way, is exactly why I didn't tell you. This right here, I didn't yell. I want to be clear about that because in the moment I really wanted to, but I've learned that yelling just gives the other person something to point to later. Instead, I just said, okay, and finished my dinner in silence. That night, I lay awake for a long time. Not really angry about the money, because we were fine, genuinely fine, even on one income. What kept eating at me was the disrespect of it. The assumption that my income was some kind of shared utility she didn't need to check in about, paired with 3 straight weeks of calculated lying. If she'd told me the day she decided to quit, even if I disagreed, at least it would have been honest. Instead, she chose theater. Somewhere around 2 a.m., an idea formed. Not revenge exactly, more like a demonstration. I wanted her to feel, just once, what it's like to build your entire day around someone else's decision that you weren't part of. I wanted her to understand, viscerally, not just intellectually, what you earn enough for both of us actually costs a household when it's a decision made in secret. So the next week, I quit my job too. Didn't discuss it. Didn't warn her. Gave my 2 weeks like a professional. Cleaned out my desk on the last day, same as she apparently had, and said absolutely nothing to her about it. Every morning after that, I still got up, put on business casual, grabbed my laptop bag, and left the house like normal, just like she had. I'd drive to a coffee shop, work on my resume, take a few calls with recruiters, sometimes just sit in my car and read for 2 hours, because ironically, I had nowhere I actually needed to be. For those first 2 weeks, our household ran on exactly what she'd been counting on: savings and my last paycheck. She had no idea any of it had changed. Around week 2, she started asking little questions. You've been coming home later than usual. I told her work had been busy, closing season, nothing unusual. She bought it completely, because why wouldn't she? I'd trusted her story for 3 weeks without question. Trust runs both directions, and I was cashing in on exactly the kind of trust she'd spent without asking. The turning point came on a random Tuesday. She came home from the gym, saw me on the couch at 2 p.m. with my laptop, and asked why I wasn't at work. I looked up and said, "Oh, I don't work there anymore." She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. "What do you mean you don't work there anymore?" "I quit. About 2 weeks ago? You quit your job? Without telling me?" I let that sentence hang in the air for a second, let her hear exactly how it sounded coming back at her. "Yeah," I said. "Figured you earn enough for both of us." Her face went through about 4 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, then realization, then something close to panic. "That's not the same thing. I earn a fraction of what you earn. You can't just quit your job to make some kind of point." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I thought when you did it. Except you weren't even trying to make a point. You just didn't think I mattered enough to tell." She sat down hard on the arm of the couch. "So this whole time, the last 2 weeks, you've been what? Just driving around pretending to go to work?" "Pretty much. Coffee shops mostly. Sent out some resumes. Had a few interviews lined up actually, real ones, because unlike you, I actually have a plan." "You don't understand," she said. "This is different. Your job pays for everything. Mine was just extra. So extra that quitting yours meant nothing. But me quitting mine means everything. Interesting how that works. Almost like income actually matters in a marriage, and maybe both of us should be part of decisions that affect it." She started crying, which I expected, because that's usually where these conversations go once the other person runs out of logic. "I can't believe you'd do something this reckless just to teach me a lesson. I can't believe you'd lie to my face for 3 weeks straight and call it not a big deal," I said. "We're either even now, or we're finally being honest with each other. Pick one." She didn't have a response for that. She went upstairs, and I heard the shower running for a very long time. The kind of long shower that's really just crying with better acoustics. The next morning was awkward in a way our house had never been awkward before. She made coffee for one instead of two, which felt symbolic even though I don't think she meant it that way. I sat at the kitchen table pretending to scroll through job boards, and she stood at the counter pretending to check her phone, and neither of us said much beyond morning. Finally, she broke it. "So, are you actually looking for jobs? Or is this still just you making a point?" "Both, I think," I said honestly. "Started as a point. Turned into an actual job search about day 4 when I realized sitting in a coffee shop for 8 hours a day is its own special, kind of miserable. Welcome to my last 3 weeks," she said. And for a second, there was almost a laugh in it. The first almost laugh either of us had managed since Denise ruined everyone's night at that happy hour. "Yeah, except you knew you weren't actually job hunting," I said. "You were just avoiding a conversation." I was avoiding one too, apparently, just a different one. The one where I admit I've hated my job for over a year and never said anything because I didn't want to seem like I was complaining when we were financially fine either way. She looked at me for a long moment. "We really are the same kind of stupid, aren't we?" Apparently. That didn't fix anything right away. It just meant the silence over the next few days had a little less venom in it. Update 1, about a week later. The fallout from the quitting reveal turned into a full-blown financial reckoning because reality doesn't care about who was trying to prove a point. We genuinely had 2 people with no income now and savings that were built assuming at least one steady paycheck. We sat down that weekend and did the math together. First real conversation about money we'd had in months. Between severance, unused vacation payout, and savings, we had roughly 4 months of runway if we kept spending exactly as we normally did. Less if either of us was picky about the next job. She wanted to know my actual plan. I told her the truth. I didn't have some grand scheme. I had genuinely quit to make a point, but I'd also been unhappy at that job for a while. The commission structure had changed for the worse. My manager was a nightmare, and honestly, the timing gave me an excuse to start looking elsewhere anyway. I had 2 interviews already scheduled with better firms, ones I'd been quietly eyeing for months, she admitted, once the shock wore off, that she genuinely had no plan either. She'd quit because she was burned out, hated her manager, and figured she'd figure something out eventually. No resume updates, no interviews lined up, no real timeline. Just vibes and my paycheck as a safety net she never actually asked permission to use. That's when the real argument started. Not about who quit or when, but about what "we're a team" actually means when only one person acts like it. "You don't get to just assume my money is also your money to make unilateral decisions with," I told her. "That's not how a partnership works. If you want to quit, we talk about it, we budget for it, we agree on a plan. What you did wasn't taking a break. It was making a decision that affects both of us and hiding it from me because you knew I'd have questions. And what you did was worse," she snapped back. "You didn't even need to quit. You did it out of spite. I did it so you'd understand what it feels like to build your whole day around a decision someone else made without you. Congratulations, now you know." We didn't speak much for the rest of that weekend. I slept in the guest room, not because anyone told me to, just because the air in our bedroom felt too heavy to share. Sunday night, she knocked on the guest room door around 11, which surprised me because by that point, I'd figured we were just going to orbit each other in silence for a few more days. "Can we talk without it turning into a fight?" she asked. I sat up. "We can try." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, not quite ready to come all the way in. "I talked to Priya today. She reminded me she told me to tell you from the start. I didn't want to hear it then. I really don't want to hear it now, but I know she's right. I know she told you," I said. She mentioned it when she stopped by. Her face flickered with something between embarrassment and betrayal, though not at me exactly, more at the situation in general. "Great. So everyone's compared notes except me and you, apparently." "That tends to happen when one of us stops talking to the other one directly," I said. Not unkindly, just stating it. She came in and sat on the edge of the bed, careful distance between us. "I keep trying to figure out why I didn't just tell you." Like actually figure it out, not just the surface reason. And I think it's because some part of me knew you'd be fair about it if I asked properly, and I didn't want fair. I wanted it to just already be decided so there was nothing left to negotiate. That was, unfortunately, the most honest thing she'd said since this whole situation started, and it also explained a lot about how she operated in general, not just with this. That's not partnership, I said. That's just avoiding partnership because it's inconvenient. I know, she said quietly. I'm working on it. We didn't solve everything that night, but it was the first conversation since Denise's comment at the happy hour that didn't end with either of us storming off. And honestly, at that point, that felt like real progress. Monday, I went to my first real interview. Went well, second round scheduled for the following week. I told her that evening, unprompted, because unlike her, I actually believe in telling my spouse what's going on with my career. She'd spent that Monday, it turned out, updating her own resume for the first time in 6 years. Small thing, but it felt like the first honest step either of us had taken since this whole mess started. My best friend Marcus called me that week, because word had apparently gotten around through my old office that I'd quit without notice to anyone but HR. Dude, what happened? Sandra said you just cleaned out your desk and left. Everyone thinks you had a breakdown. I gave him the short version. He was quiet for a second, then started laughing so hard I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You quit your job to win an argument. That's the single most married thing I've ever heard in my life. It wasn't about winning, I said, even though I knew that was only half true. It was about her actually understanding what she did. Sure, man, whatever helps you sleep at night. So how's the sleeping going? Poorly, I admitted. Guest room's got a terrible mattress. Marcus, being Marcus, offered zero sympathy and instead spent the next 10 minutes asking increasingly detailed questions about how I'd managed to fake going to work for 2 weeks without her noticing, like it was some kind of heist movie. Did you have like a burner laptop bag? Did you time your car in the driveway to match her schedule? I told him it wasn't nearly as elaborate as he was imagining. Mostly just a normal routine and a wife who wasn't paying close attention because she assumed everything was fine. Same assumption I'd been making about her for 3 weeks. He did say one useful thing before we hung up, though. You know, this only works if you actually follow through on the honesty part now, right? Because if you just go back to normal after she apologizes, you taught her nothing except that you're willing to blow up your own career for a point. The lesson only sticks if the new rules stick too. That stuck with me more than I expected it to. Update 2, about 3 weeks in. Things got tense with family, because of course they did. My mother-in-law called me directly, which should tell you everything about how that conversation went. I heard you quit your job over some kind of tantrum, she said. No greeting, straight into it. I quit my job because I decided to, I said. Same as your daughter did 3 weeks before me. Funny how it's a tantrum when I do it and just a personal choice when she does. She had a hard year at that office. You did this to punish her. I did this so she'd understand what it feels like to have a decision made for her without a conversation. If she'd told me she was quitting, we'd have planned for it. Instead, she lied to my face for 3 weeks and called it not a big deal. I just wanted her to feel what that's like from the other side. Silence on the line. The kind where you can tell someone's recalculating their argument. Well, you two need to figure this out before you run out of money. Working on it, I said. Appreciate the concern, and left it there. My own parents, to their credit, mostly just asked if we were okay financially and left the judgment out of it. My dad did say one thing that stuck with me. Marriage isn't a scoreboard, but sometimes people need the score read back to them before they understand the rules. Fair enough. Around this time, the money pressure started actually biting. Not dramatically, we weren't going to lose the house or anything, but the small comforts started disappearing. No more casual takeout 3 times a week. No more impulse Amazon orders. We canceled 2 subscription services we barely used and finally noticed we were paying for. It's amazing how quickly a household adjusts once both incomes disappear at once, and equally amazing how much unnecessary spending was happening on autopilot before that. She got a part-time job at a boutique downtown, temporary, just to bring something in while she looked for something better in her field. I respected that she actually did it instead of waiting around. Small thing, but it mattered. I had my second interview that week, then a third the week after with a different firm entirely, better base salary, better commission structure, actual growth path instead of the dead end I'd been sitting in for 2 years. Funny how getting pushed into something you'd been avoiding sometimes turns out to be the thing you needed. Her best friend Priya showed up one evening too, uninvited but not unwelcome exactly, the way close friends sometimes just let themselves into a situation. She sat at our kitchen table with a glass of wine she didn't ask for, and looked at me like she was deciding whether to be diplomatic or direct. She went with direct. "So you really quit your job just to prove a point to her?" "Pretty much," I said, not bothering to dress it up anymore. There wasn't much point pretending otherwise at this stage. "That's insane," Priya said, "but also, not going to lie, kind of deserved." She told me about it, the whole 3 weeks of lying thing, before any of this happened, like she thought it was funny. I told her that was a bad idea. She didn't listen. That was new information, and it landed harder than I expected. "Wait, you knew? The whole time?" Priya had the decency to look a little guilty. "I told her to tell you. I did. She said you'd overreact, make it a whole thing, turn it into a budget meeting. She wasn't wrong about the budget meeting part, was she?" "No," I admitted. "She wasn't. But she was wrong about the rest of it," Priya said. "Lying for 3 weeks isn't avoiding an overreaction. It's guaranteeing a worse one eventually." I told her that too. Guess we're here now. I appreciated Priya's honesty more than I expected to, mostly because it confirmed something I'd suspected but couldn't prove, that this hadn't been some spontaneous, burned-out impulse. It had been a decision she'd talked through with someone else, gotten advice on, and chosen to ignore. That reframed things a little for me, not in a worse way exactly, just a clearer one. She hadn't just avoided a hard conversation. She'd been warned to have it and decided the lie was easier anyway. Update 3, about 5 weeks in. This is where it either was going to fall apart completely or actually get better. And honestly, for a few days, I wasn't sure which way it would go. We had what I'd call the real conversation, the one that should have happened 5 weeks earlier before any of this started. No yelling, no gotchas, just two people finally being honest about what they actually wanted. She admitted the job had been making her miserable for over a year, that she'd fantasized about quitting for months but felt like she couldn't bring it up because every time she mentioned being unhappy at work, I'd respond with practical stuff, like suggesting she look for something new or ask what the actual plan was, instead of just validating that she was tired. She said she felt like I'd turn any conversation about quitting into a spreadsheet instead of a feeling, so she stopped trying to have the conversation and just made the decision herself. That landed harder than I expected, honestly, because there was some truth in it. I am a planner. I do turn things into spreadsheets. That's not an excuse for lying for 3 weeks, but it did explain, at least partly, why she avoided bringing it up honestly in the first place. I told her the truth too. That quitting my job hadn't really been about revenge by the time I actually did it. Even though it started that way in my head at 2 a.m., it had become an actual opportunity to leave a job I'd been unhappy in for a while, dressed up as a point I needed to prove. Sometimes the petty move and the right move end up being the same move, which is either poetic or just lucky. I genuinely don't know which. We agreed on some actual ground rules moving forward, out loud, both of us saying them, not just assuming the other person understood. Any decision that affects both incomes gets discussed before it happens, not after. If one of us is miserable at work, we talk about it honestly instead of either steamrolling a solution or hiding it entirely.